Right, good day, Junior Techies, and thank you for joining me. We're going to be doing questions 1 and 2 from the worksheet. So I do hope you have the worksheet in front of you and you've tried these questions already, but we're going to be working through questions 1 and 2. My name is Mr. P. I'm taking you through the section on plant diversity, so let's dive right in. So when we look at question 1 and 2, particularly in this case, it's so important that when you see an image that you've not seen before, that you get context first before you start looking at the questions. So what I would suggest is cover up the questions and see if you can make sense of the image that you've been given. So let's do that now. So we'll see now that over here we find a common green algal ancestor at the first point at the bottom of this particular type of image that we see here. From this point, we've got a little bit of evolution that takes place. So time passes and we have the formation of those different plant classifications that we see over there. First one we see is Bryophytes, which have evolved from that common green algal ancestor. And when these Bryophytes started to develop vascular tissue, they formed our next classification, which we see here as our Arteritophytes. Terrestrials then, the addition of the formation of seeds, became or evolved into our gymnosperms, and then with the addition of flowers and fruits, we end up with our angiosperms. And this is all over a very long period of time. We see that when we get to angiosperms, we have plants that have vascular tissue, we have plants that have seeds, and produce flowers and fruits. Can you see that that is now the end of our evolutionary scale in this situation? Okay, so I think we've got enough context now for us to look at the questions. So first question 1.1, name the representation presented above. So this type of diagram we refer to as a phylogenetic tree or a cladogram. So basically this diagram shows evolutionary relationships between organisms. And in this case, we're looking at the evolutionary relationships between these classifications of plants. Question 1.2, explain which terrestrial plant is least suited for life on land. So we can see that it says explain, so that means what and why. And we can answer this by saying that, okay, it's the Bryophytes. Now we know that both Terrestrials and Bryophytes rely heavily on water for reproduction, but the Bryophytes are going to rely more heavily on water because they are the gametophyte dominant of those two examples that we see there. But they lack the vascular tissue. And where do we see that? Well, we can see that in the image itself there. It says the development of vascular tissue. That would mean that Bryophytes lack the vascular tissue, which makes them least suited for life on land. Gymnosperms are considered more advanced than Bryophytes, provide evidence from the image to support this statement. Now that's so important for us to remember. Now we're going for evidence from the image that we are given that motivate the fact that gymnosperms are more advanced. So we can see that jumping from Bryophytes to gymnosperms, we've got the development of both vascular tissue and seeds. So for those 2 marks, we would need to have those 2 answers because we are motivating from the image given. Right, let's have a look at question 2 quickly. It said study the images presented below and answer the questions that follow. Now some of us will be able to identify these pretty quickly, others not so much. If you don't identify them right off the bat, then maybe take a few minutes just to get some context in the image here. We'll see that the first picture there, we've got a label A. Second picture, there's a label B. Third picture, we've got a label C. And then we aren't asked any labels for question 4, but we can see clearly that there are cones present on that part of the plant. So yeah, question 2.1 says to us, label structures A to C. And if we look at the fact that plant number 1 is our fern, 2 is our bryophyte, 3 is a section through a flower, you can see the branch of the conifer there, but if we're labeling A, B, and C, should be easier for us now to do so. A, root or root-like structures. B, rhizoid. And C, it's the stigma of the female part of the plant or the flower. Right, it asks us here to tabulate the differences between the reproduction of plants 2 and 4. So let's see quickly. Plant 2 is our bryophyte. Plant 4 is our gymnosperms, which is our conifer. Now, if you're not too sure about reproduction, please visit one of the other theory videos dealing with bryophytes and gymnosperms just to get a better understanding of those before you attempt to answer this question for 5 marks. So if we look at the tabulation here, our heading is super important. So I've just popped it all in there for us quickly. Table of the differences between the reproduction of plants 2, or it's the moss plant, and plant 4, which is the conifer or pine tree. So we can see here that plant 2, which is the moss, needs water for fertilization, but plant 4, there is no need for that. It's more adapted to life on land. Plant 2 also reproduces by means of spores, and the plant 4 reproduces by means of pollen. Okay. Our heading underlined, and you'll see the 5th mark there is awarded for us answering the question in the form of a table. If we look at question 2.3, state only the number of the plant that. Now, we must remember that the question asks us for the number only. So if I write the name down, I won't get my marks. So let's have a look quickly. The number of the plant that has no vascular tissue, plant number 2, bryophytes. Okay, but we're writing the number down. State only the number of the plant that bears fruit. Here we're talking about our angiosperm, so we're talking about our flowering plant, which is plant 3. And state only the number of the plant or plants that does not produce seeds. Now, let's have a look at the mark allocation here. Because the mark allocation is 2 marks, we know that we're going to have to provide 2 answers. So if we look carefully here, we'll see that there are 2 examples here that do not produce seeds, and they're going to be options. Oh, that's incorrect. Yeah, my apologies for that, Junior Techies. You'll see I've just quickly corrected myself there. I misread the question. It's not does produce seeds, it does not produce seeds. So they're the examples we are looking at are plants 1 and 2. If we carry on from this question now, we have a look at question 2.4. Where we have to draw the bryophyte example and label it. You'll see that we've got the gametophyte at the bottom in the dark green, and I've just drawn the seta and the sporangium very quickly there. We're looking at specific examples, so specific labels, my apologies. So we're looking at sporangium there, we're looking at seta, we're going to be looking at the leaf-like structures, which can be male or female, and we're looking at the rhizoid at the bottom. If we had to divide these 2 up into the sporophyte and the gametophyte generations, we'll see the sporophyte at the top, encompassing or including the sporangium and the seta, and the gametophyte generation from the rhizoid to the top of the leaf-like structures. So that's us answering all of those questions. I do hope that this has made good sense to you, and that it has given you some context in how to answer some of these difficult questions that you might get in grade 11. Tune into some of our other videos. We're going to be doing some of the other questions in the worksheet later. I do hope to see you then. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.